Hello, students. Today we're going to talk about competitive UK universities. Remember, what's true for you is not necessarily true for others. World university systems are very dependent upon passport, what sort of classes you take or qualifications you have, what tests you're using to get into university. So it's a very individualized process. So try not to talk to others about their process and make it a direct comparison because a lot of times a student's passport can really change either what is required of a British university, particularly, or other elements of the application process. And as we go through this discovery of university search within the University Quest process, remember that even though we may be looking at the same university system like the UK, it could have very different outcomes for us in terms of what our choices are. And each person is entitled to their own choices when it comes to the university admissions process. So first, a little bit of a difference between the competitive universities in the UK and the highly selective UK programs. So we have our medical professions, Oxford and Cambridge. We are going to talk more about that later on in a more specific webinar geared towards medical professions, Oxford and Cambridge. But just know we're not going to talk about that process in this webinar. So if you're interested in applying to Oxford and Cambridge, you should continue watching this webinar, but you will also get another supplementary event for Oxford, Cambridge, and medical professions. So today we're going to talk about competitive UK universities. So this is the Russell Group of universities. You see all of the universities on this list except for Oxford and Cambridge would represent competitive UK universities. With competitive universities in the UK, we do very, very well at NITO, having about a 70 or 80% chance of getting a conditional offer if you hold the predicted grades that are required for the university application process. Now, when it comes to Oxford and Cambridge, we have less than a 1% chance of getting accepted to either Oxford or Cambridge. That's just a global percentage that when you go for a very, very selective program like Oxford and Cambridge, where you have a particular interview that you have to do, the rest of these universities rarely have interview components to their application process, and the Oxford and Cambridge process changes your percentage from the NITO percentage of UK competitive universities from about 70-80% to 1%. So it's important to make that differentiation. Also, if you apply to medicine at any of these competitive universities, your percentage chance goes down to about 5% or below, depending upon your passport. So we're going to go through myths now about the UK university process. So remember, when we see this on the screen, this is not true. So we're going to go through myths and then truths. So our first myth is, I should apply to a UK university at the top end of my qualifications. So that means, hey, if I got a 39 predicted score of my IB, I should go for all schools that require a 39. It's kind of a popular idea at NITO. It is wrong. The reality is you should choose a UK school that is right for you, and the program that you choose really matters. It's important to research thoroughly the program you're trying to get accepted to. A lot of students will apply to a program just because it is harder to get into, because they think that the better the program, the harder it is to get into. But that's really not true in the UK. You could have a top-end program, incredibly highly ranked university and program that has an entry score of a 33 or 34. University of Edinburgh courses for international applicants are almost all 34 total IB points. Now, of course, they have other HL scores, but the IB is a hard qualification. So taking it and getting a good score, which is within our range of the NITO average between 33, 34, that is going to get you a lot in the UK. So it's not necessary to choose universities that are all at 39. It'll also become much more important when we talk about what a conditional offer is versus being acceptance in the UK. So if your job isn't to try to pick a university that is the hardest to get into, then what is the purpose that you're trying to do here of finding a good UK university program? So how you evaluate a UK university program is it should do these things: align with your core values, build on your strengths and talents, connect to your understanding of the major, make you feel more energized, engaged in wanting to study that subject at a UK university. So you should ask yourself these questions about what the program actually offers you. Yes, what classes they take, that's important. The details of what options they give you, all of that's important, but really, how does it speak to you and your definition of the major that you're interested in? So myth number 2, competitive UK universities care a lot about my extracurricular subjects. That's certainly true in the US, but when it comes to the UK, they're not so interested in extracurricular so much as supercurricular. So passion for your subject. And what does supercurricular actually mean? Well, LSE wants to know when you apply to any of their majors, and LSE is just a good competitive university example. They want to know your enthusiasm, motivation for the subject, understanding or experience of the subject, academic engagement with the subject, 80%. We'll talk about that in a minute. Relevant knowledge and skills for the subject, and originality and independence of thought. So pretty much matching what the questions I asked you before. And of course that's intentional because we're trying to have you ask yourself the questions that then the universities want you to answer within the application process, mostly within the personal statement. So let's go into this super curricular activities and what it means. So here is a breakdown of what schools want to know, particularly when we're talking about the personal statement for the UK. Remember, in the UK, you really only have 3 elements to your application. You have the letter of recommendation, or what we call in the UK, the letter of reference from your referee. That's what they call it in the UK. That's one element. So teacher letter of recommendation. Then you have your IB predicted grades or other predicted grades or subject grades attained through SAT subject tests usually, or a full-scale SAT or ACT along with your GPA, plus your personal statement. So there's really only 3 elements: personal statement, grades, and your teacher letter. So 80% is academic, including supercurricular. So what do we mean when we say supercurricular? Well, here it says that it's related to your course, right? And then, of course, on the side, you can see some of the other things that universities want you to know. But the idea of supercurricular is the most important element of a UK university. So what does this mean? Well, one of my favorite examples is of a student, NITO student, a long time back. She was a horseback rider. And she would go horseback riding at her local barn. She was interested in studying business. She was having difficulty finding an internship, and one day she mentioned this to her horseback riding trainer, who then allowed her to look at the barn's finances books and she discovered a finances internship inside her horseback riding activity. So the horseback riding activity started off as extracurricular, but as soon as she started doing the books for their finances, it became an internship for business. So there, how you see it went from extracurricular, horseback riding, to supercurricular, which was the financial aspect of it. It's a great example of how an extracurricular activity can turn supercurricular. An idea of just something that is, let's say, extracurricular purely would be if you're interested in business and you play the violin, but it isn't really at all part of the subject of business. So those two examples really differentiate the idea between extracurricular, not related to your subject or major of choice, and supercurricular, related to your major of choice. So how have you shown that evidence? Remember, showing that evidence with supercurricular activities is one of the ways you can show that you're interested in. Remember, supercurricular activities do not have to be a super formalized internship, or these can be also conversations with family. I've had students who have a business management mother or father and sat down with them at the dinner table and said, hey, I'm interested in what you do. I want to study it. Let's talk about it. And it's become very, very fruitful discussions. And much of those have actually led to some sort of internship. UK universities know that it's hard for kids outside Europe to get internships. So having either a mentorship means that you contact someone in your family or family friend network who's in your field, and you meet with them over Google Hangouts or Skype once or twice a month, where they give you articles to read or perhaps problem sets to solve. And these relationships can actually also turn very, very fruitful in your personal statement. UK universities want you to show evidence, but your evidence is only needed to show how you have taken your busy lives and incorporated a supercurricular element to it. So myth number 3, you need to know exactly what you want to study to apply to UK universities. A lot of people think that you need to narrowly define what it is you want to study, but that isn't necessarily true. You see on the spectrum of majors, yes, USA is definitely more exploratory and UK is definitely more specialized, but that doesn't mean you can't take an exploratory major in the UK. It just means that you need to decide how much you want to explore versus how much you want to narrowly define your major. So the word here we're talking about in terms of the myth is exactly. So I said in that myth, you need to know exactly what it is you want to study, but that's not really true. You want to know actually how broad or wide open your road is versus how narrow your road is for studying your subject. So a great example of this is University of Southampton. If you choose to take one of their business courses, you're allowed to take a variety of actually humanities courses with that. Southampton happens to have the most flexible business program, interdisciplinary business program in the UK. So if you went for a business management degree, you'd actually be able to take history classes. Now, if we were to compare that major to, let's say, LSE, London School of Economics, management major, their management major is very traditional. That means it's much more narrow. The options of classes you have to take outside of the area of business management is very, very restricted. So see, same name of the major, Southampton, business management, LSE, business management. And a lot of people would think, well, I should just go with LSE because it has a better name or it has higher ranked. But if you have interest in studying other subjects and you're wanting a wide open view of courses, then going for something like Southampton with an interdisciplinary program is really important. However, if you really like to narrowly define your major and you only want to take classes in business, then it's important to go for something more like LSE with a traditional business management course. So you don't need to know exactly what it is you want to study, but you have to know whether or not you want to have the option of taking courses outside your major or not. Some students really want to have the opportunity or option to take, for example, history classes when they're a business management major. Some people do not want to have that opportunity, and that's a really important point of choosing a UK course for you. And remember, in this webinar, we're going to use the word course and major interchangeably because in the UK, they use both words. Myth number 4, you need an IB diploma to apply to a competitive UK university. While this may have been true in some past years, it is no longer true. There are many different qualification pathways to apply to a UK university. Yes, while IB is sort of the direct pathway, if you use SAT, ACT, SAT subject tests, a variety GPA, you can also use your Chilean name now at British universities. It's kind of going to look like this tree a little bit though, because each little pathway is going to be very unique to the program and the university, and some of the universities don't even have their qualifications, SAT subject tests, GPAs listed on their website. So while the IB is kind of like this straight pathway, you know what you have and what the university requires, the many pathways looks a lot more like this, where each sort of pathway is going to wind around. And sometimes it's hard to find an exact answer from British universities, but they do have the qualifications, and students have been and continue to increase the amount of students who are successful at applying to British universities, not just for foundation year, and we'll talk more about foundation year and partial IB students and students applying to the UK without an IB in another webinar. We'll talk about that particularly for partial kids and kids looking for foundation year. But just know that you can use the SAT and a strong GPA to apply to competitive UK universities, even at the top end. So it's not just an IB only country, that's for sure. And a lot of times, the qualifications that you would give a British university, SAT subject, ACT, GPA, can be a lot more modest than a competitive US university. So you could actually increase your competitive range by applying to UK universities and using these alternative pathways. Just so you know, though, you can't use alternative pathways if you are a full IB diploma student. If you're a full IB diploma student, you must use the full IB in order to apply.
Myth number 5. You get accepted to a UK university. This is not true. You get a conditional offer. So what's the difference between a conditional offer and an acceptance? More and more now, there are conditions for SAT and GPA and even Chilean name. So there's a lot of variety. But here's an example of an IB, very specific, 34 IB points with 655 at HL, and then even including subject specific. Versus when you're accepted, the country or university system that accepts you expects you to get the same grades that you applied with. So being within a very close range of your grades that you had when you applied. So it's very different than a conditional offer. Because, for example, if you were predicted a 38 and you were expected to keep your same grades, you would need to, if you're accepted to a university, like in the US, for example, they would expect that you would get a 38. While the University of Edinburgh, which is this offer for IB is an example from the University of Edinburgh, the University of Edinburgh would expect you to get a 34. So even though you had a predicted 38, Edinburgh would accept you with a 34 at 655. If you get that, not a point more, you get accepted. That's what you made your conditions. So as you see, it's a very different idea of being accepted and having the expectation that your grades will be maintained, and a conditional offer where you have to make the condition, but any way that you make it or get above your condition, you are going to that university. Myth number 6. Your program is most important in deciding which competitive UK university is good for you. So a lot of students think that because we talk so much about program, that must be the most important element of a British university. But the truth is that it's much more of a balance. There is a very particular fit for each British university that usually is associated with the surroundings. Is it in the countryside? Is it in a castle? Is it surrounded by canals? Is it surrounded by a city in central London? These are very different worlds, even though the UK is a relatively small landmass. There's a lot of variety in the type of lifestyles at university that you could be a part of. And fit is more important than program, because we say, although it is a 50-50 balance between your life and your school in terms of happiness at university, this is weighted. That means that if you like your school but you love your life at university, you will likely stay at the university. But if you don't like your life and you actually just really love you're likely going to want to change universities. But make sure that that program is at a university environment that fits you. The University of St. Andrews, a smaller university in Scotland, is going to feel that where you can live in castles is going to feel very different than going to University College London next to Russell Square in the heart of the city. Those two experiences are going to be incredibly different. No judgment on which is better or worse. It's just what's a right fit for you. So remember, fit is more important than program. So in the end, make this your choice. The British university system is fantastic. Whether you go to Warwick or Nottingham or York or Newcastle or any of the Russell Group universities, the British universities in general, they are all great. So remember, you can't really go wrong with a UK university choice. Don't forget, fit is more important than program, but program is most important for application.